I can't think of anyone else in history who was a false prophet, who people believed spoke in the name of the Lord. That was not. And the key, most important feature of this individual is that he had wounds between his hands. Zechariah 13, context, my friends, context, it's messianic. A fountain be opened for the house of David, for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and uncleanliness. False prophets will confess their sin, and they'll be ashamed of what they've done. They will admit that I was speaking falsely in the name of the Lord. So at the end of days, the key event that will unfold is that everyone will see the truth. The whole world will recognize the truth and will renounce their sin. Okay, that's the key part of the end of days. Or they will have gone to war against the God of Israel by going to war with the people of Israel, and they'll be utterly destroyed. Okay? There will be a false prophet who will come forward, and he's going to be deeply ashamed of his behavior. And he will say, I'm really no prophet. I really should have been someone who breeds animals and a tiller of the soil. See Zechariah 13, verse 1 through 6. And then people are going to come over to him and ask him this question: Mo hamakos ha'ele bein yodecha? What are those wounds between your hands? V'omar, he will reply, asher hukesi beis me'avai. Those are the wounds that I received in the house of my friends. Okay? So at the end is an end-time prophecy, and in the end, a false prophet who's obviously very prominent, who's very striking, and if you want to know something about him, he has wounds in his hands. And people will ask him, why are there wounds in your hands? And he will respond, I receive them from my own people. Bingo. Here's even a greater shocker. There are missionaries who actually use this verse, Zechariah 13, verse 6, out of context to say, we have a prophecy about Jesus being crucified. I'm not kidding. I don't want to embarrass them, and I don't call out names, but there are major league missionaries who will put these kinds of passages, including Zechariah 13:6, in their missionary material, insisting that this proves that Jesus' crucified body will be revealed to the world at the end of days. And if you don't read that in context, you think, well, that sure looks like a crucifixion to me. Now, I want to say, because I don't want to mischaracterize all Christians. There are some responsible Christians in their commentary that warn Christians, do not think this is talking about Christ, because that's blasphemy. I'm not kidding. So strangely, you have a passage that's clearly talking about a false Messiah at the end of days, because we know at the end of days, there's going to be, as we see in Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, there are many who sleep in the earth, who will rise, some for everlasting life and others for everlasting contempt and damnation. Think about that for a moment. We have a passage in Daniel 12 very famous, that tells us that the truly wicked will be brought back temporarily. For what purpose? For contempt and damnation, meaning that people will see in their eyes, whoa, what a lie. What an evil person brought so many people astray. Okay? Because you might ask, at the end of days, there's someone who is going to confess that he was all along a false prophet, and people are going to ask him. That means he has to be around. Well, if he has to be around, how could that be a crucified Messiah who people thought was the Redeemer, who was not? It was a false Messiah. The answer is Daniel 12, verse 2. And that is that the very wicked will be brought back for contempt, that the world should see the truth. The most important thing, most important element, feature of the Messianic age is that the whole world will know the truth, and the knowledge of God will cover the world as the water covers the sea. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9, similar passages to Habakkuk. It's everywhere. And interestingly, you're going to think this is nuts, but there are some Christian Bibles that actually seek to cover that by saying, what are those wounds on your back? Because the words in the text, the Hebrew is, Mohamakos elu ben yodecha, what are those wounds between your hands? Okay? Like if you speak sign language, you know what that means, right? But they don't want that in there, right? So they actually put on your back, because like what's between your hands, your body, your torso. But what that does is it successfully, so if using the ESV, right, it then masks what it says. To what percentage do I assign that passage to the likelihood of being Jesus? I can't think of anyone else in history who was a false prophet, who people believed spoke in the name of the Lord. That was not. And the key, most important feature of this individual is that he had wounds between his hands. Could you? So I can't think of anyone else. And I encourage you to look at Zechariah 13:6 and just look at the nervousness of the translators and commentators on this. And I have had missionaries come over to me with Zechariah 13, verse 6, insisting this was an explicit passage speaking of a crucified Savior. When, if you read it in context, it's about a false prophet who's ashamed of himself, who confesses everything at the end of days.